I feel like there's this whole generation of women that were given birth control pills for things like acne, PMS, missing cycles. When we prescribe birth control, like oral contraceptive pills, with the goal of fixing someone's missing period, I take serious issue with that because most of the time there's an underlying issue that needs to be resolved. And even if you don't want to have kids one day, your period tells you so much about your health. Living in a chronically low estrogen state is not good for us, regardless if you want to have kids or not. Hello friends, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Emily, and today's video is going to be all about losing your period and getting it back. If you have ever struggled with period abnormalities, having an irregular cycle, or losing your cycle entirely, this video is for you. So I'll be walking you guys through my personal story with hypothalamic amenorrhea, how I lost my period to begin with, different things I tried to get it back, and then eventually how I got it back and kind of where I'm at now with my period, as well as answering some questions that you guys had for me on Instagram if there's some time for that. Super important before we get started, this is not intended as medical advice. I am a nurse and I'm in school to be a women's health NP, but this is my personal story. This is not medical advice. Please go see your provider for any medical questions. Cool. Oh, I also have COVID right now, so my voice doesn't sound great. Apologies if I'm like coughing and sniffling in this video. So I got my first period when I was 14 years old. I literally remember getting it like that February of 8th grade, and that was the only period I had until I was 19 years old. So I went from age 14 to age 19 with no period. And when you first get your period, like I'm sure many of y'all have experienced, your cycles are usually irregular at first. Your body's figuring itself out, your weight distribution is changing, your hormone levels are acclimating to like a normal adult body. That is normal, but when they go absent for years, that's not normal. And that's kind of a theme of this video, is if you are not having regular periods and you are an adult female with no underlying health condition that would change your menstrual cycle, that is a problem and you need to seek medical help, because not having a normal cycle is not normal. Our periods are like a fifth vital sign in my opinion. They tell us so much about how our body is doing, about how we're coping with stress, about how our hormones are being regulated, and you need to pay attention to it. Of course, when I got my first period and then didn't get a second one, I was like, woohoo, I don't like periods, they're weird and gross, I don't want any part of this. And my parents didn't think anything of it. My pediatrician was like, yeah, she's 14, this is normal, abnormal cycles. But when it went on until I was 16 years old, he was like, let's go send her to the OB/GYN. So I was 16, still wasn't menstruating, went and saw an OB, and had a very traumatic experience at the obstetrician, which I can do a whole separate video about if you're interested. It's one of the reasons that I'm even in school to be a women's health provider. It was awful, but the short of it is she basically took one look at me, did a like external exam, weighed me, and said, you're just a skinny late bloomer, go eat a hamburger. You do not tell someone with anorexia that, because lo and behold, when I was 14 and lost my period, I also started developing anorexia. So there you go. Be honest, at that age, I didn't really care. I was like, I'm 16, I'm skinny, I like being skinny. I don't want a period because it means that I'm fat or something, which is not true. It means that your body is able to bear children one day. Like, how beautiful of a gift that is, that we are becoming adult women who can eventually maybe get pregnant and carry a child to term. That is a very cool thing. And even if you don't want to have kids one day, your period tells you so much about your health. It regulates so many things. Having adequate endogenous estrogen is so important for the health of your body, regardless of your future reproductive plans. So please keep that in mind if you have lost your period. I go see the OB/GYN. She's like, yeah, just gain some weight. I'm like, nah, I don't really want to because I have anorexia. Didn't say that, of course, but I was like, sure, whatever. Went home, proceeded to still not have a period for 3 more years. I think it's important that we talk about biology a little bit, so I brought out my nifty little period chart. It's more artwork than anything, and I will link the Etsy artist who made this beautiful desk decor because I love it. But as a future women's health provider, I think it's imperative that we talk about how periods work. So I can make a whole separate like biology video, which I totally will one day. If you are interested, let me know. I think the easiest way to explain why periods disappear from time to time is the function of the hypothalamus, right? So let me put this down. I don't want to have to hold it the whole time. So the function of the hypothalamus, right? It works in this axis called the hypothalamic pituitary gonadal, or ovarian in our cases women, axis. It works in this beautiful neuroendocrine cascade of hormones that helps to communicate to the body that, hey, it is safe to potentially reproduce and grow another human in our body. So we have adequate nutrition available, we have low enough stress levels, we have adequate body fat and normal estrogen to be able to sustain a pregnancy. If the hypothalamus perceives any threat to being able to expend extra energy to potentially reproduce, it's going to shut that down, because reproduction is not an essential function. Like keeping your body breathing, your heart beating, your brain working, keeping you alive right in this moment is more important than potentially reproducing, right? So if we have to cut off resources somewhere in the body, it's gonna be something like reproduction. That is what my PA when I was 19 told me. She was like, you don't have extra energy in your house, if you will, of your body to even afford to have a period. Like you have to have enough fat available, enough estrogen, enough calories to be able to sustain a pregnancy, or even just sustain a loss of endometrial cells. My PA basically told me that because I was underweight and didn't have enough body fat, was undernourished and not eating enough, and was over-exercising and stressing my body out, as well as not getting enough sleep and just having too much lifestyle stress, I was communicating to my body and ultimately to my hypothalamus that we are not safe and we are not well-resourced enough to have a kid. And when she put it into those terms for me, that's really what clicked and totally changed my mindset. And I was like, dang, this is my health. We're talking about my health right now, as well as my long-term health. And if I don't get my period back, I might not be able to have kids one day. And even beyond the fertility conversation, I might not be able to have adequately dense bones. I might not be able to have a regulated mood, to just feel like a woman, to have normal skin and hair and nails and all of these things that estrogen is involved in our body. Like living in a chronically low estrogen state is not good for us, regardless if you want to have kids or not. If you hear anything in all of this sciencey talk, just hear this. Not having a normal cycle is not good for you. It's not good for your body, it's not good for your brain, it's not good for your future reproductive functioning. It's just not a good thing. And so getting your period back and regulating it naturally is so, so important. Keyword I said there, right? Naturally. I want to say another disclaimer, I am not against birth control by any means. When we talk about contraception, it's a very individualized discussion. However, when we prescribe birth control, like oral contraceptive pills, with the goal of fixing someone's missing period, I take serious issue with that, because most of the time there's an underlying issue that needs to be resolved that slapping birth control pills on will not fix. I feel like there's this whole generation of women that were given birth control pills for things like acne, PMS, missing cycles, just sort of like kickstart things. Sure, like certain types of birth control will give you this withdrawal bleed period, but it's not your actual period. And I don't think that education is always given to women when we're having these conversations with providers, right? Birth control induced period is not your natural cycle. So if you're taking oral contraceptive pills with the goal of fixing your cycle, you're not actually seeing what your natural cycle is doing. And of course, I was one of those women when I was 16 years old who went to the OBGYN and was given a birth control prescription. I was not sexually active. I had very obvious signs of anorexia, and I was given this prescription to sort of kickstart my period. I took it for maybe a year and a half. To be honest, I don't remember a lot of that time because I was so malnourished that I don't have a great memory of high school, which is sad but true. And so I think I was on like a combined estrogen, progesterone, and a progesterone only at some point. But I either took myself off of it or was taken off of it by my provider, and didn't really follow up after that. So that's my experience with the OBGYN when I was in high school. Eventually I go to college, I'm 19 years old, and I decide it is time to get this together because not having a period is not normal. Don't we love that I finally had that epiphany? So I eventually sought treatment for my eating disorder once I realized that's what was going on. Started working with a PA and an MD team out of Houston. They are phenomenal, and started seeing a dietitian and therapist as well, and really started my recovery journey when I was 19. It's intensive 4 or 5 months of treatment that actually ended up resulting in me getting my period back in October of 2016, right before I turned 20 years old. And ever since then, I have had regular periods, and that is the biggest blessing ever. I definitely feel much healthier, more like a woman, less nervous about my future fertility. I'll get into that later because I do still have concerns, but really ever since getting my period back, that like launched me into my recovery from my eating disorder and was such a strong motivator for me to restore other aspects of my health and then to really dive into women's health. Like, this story with my period is one of the biggest reasons why I'm even in women's health right now. So it's very special to me and I appreciate you listening to my story. Okay, so let's get into the rest of this video. Like, what did I actually practically do to get my period back? And honestly, y'all, it's a lot simpler than you might think. If we're talking about chronic stress on the body preventing you from having the resources to expend on a period, we have to reduce stress, right? And what does stress look like? Nutritional stress, exercise, actual lifestyle stress, life stressors, life events, sleep. These are like the 4 big things of nutrition, exercise, stress, and sleep that are the biggest things I focused on in my recovery. So that nutrition piece of nutritional stress was huge for me. And everyone loves to ask, how much do you have to eat to get your period back? I am not a dietitian. I will happily link some of my favorite period dietitians in the description below, but I will say this book, No Period, Now What? I have not read all of it. Disclaimer, okay? I've read chunks of it, but it is super helpful in walking you through the practicalities of how much do I have to eat, what type of exercise is still safe, all of that. Obviously, talk to your healthcare provider before changing anything. The book typically recommends like 2,500 to 3,500 calories. And that's what you'll see pretty consistently for like eating disorder recovery, even like self-help recovery blogs. It's like 3,000 calories, right? Please do not do this without medical supervision. Please, 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 please. There are lots of period recovery things out there that's like force yourself to eat 4,000 calories a day, like the mini mod, whatever stuff for eating disorder recovery. Don't do that. Don't do that. Go get medical help, actual professional help, please. Okay, great, cool. These recommendations, the thing they do have in common is adequacy, right? You have to have adequate nutrition and even beyond adequate nutrition to nourish your body, to fix any deficits or gaps in your nutrition, restore any weight that needs to be restored, and then giving yourself extra to even be able to give the extra to have a period. And then within nutrition, adequacy of different types of food, right? So you wanna have adequate carbohydrates, protein, fats, like full fats. You wanna have fruits and vegetables, just like a balanced diet where you're eating enough of all the food groups. And seeing a registered dietitian can help you so much with that. I worked with some amazing dietitians in my recovery, and they are honestly the biggest reason I got my period back. But the other piece of this that was super important was stopping all exercise. Now, my body's very sensitive to exercise changes and nutritional changes. You might be someone who can still do low intensity exercise and menstruate, and that's great. But for me at the time, I had to stop all physical activity besides like activities of daily living and walking to class and stuff in order to actually get my periods back because I had been under so much like exercise stress for years. I actually stopped exercising for 3 years, which I've talked about on like Instagram and past blog posts and things. And it was really hard, but it was definitely what I needed. You very well might need to really tone down exercise in order to get your period back. The other piece of this is gonna be sleep. So consistent, adequate sleep. If you're not sleeping enough, your body doesn't have the time to actually like do the restoring of your bones and your body fat and your brain health and helping your uterus actually have a period and communicating between your brain and your ovaries and your uterus and all the good things. Give it sleep, give it time to give you a period. You need to restore your body. And then stress as a whole. So all of these factors that play into getting your period back have to do with cumulative stress on the body and your brain's perception of that stress and how it impacts you. So if you are just a chronically anxious person like me, therapy, medication, lifestyle changes, all of this can help really lower your stress and help you get your period back eventually. All right, so that is basically how I got my period back. It sounds super simple. Honestly, the process was very stressful and emotional and difficult because sometimes you do all of these things and your period still doesn't come back, and it can be really confusing and frustrating. And honestly, at that point, getting like a hormone panel done, looking at your bone density through like a DEXA scan, doing different ultrasounds to look at your reproductive anatomy, that could be a really great opportunity to figure out if there are any underlying issues going on. It could be contributing to your amenorrhea. So another thing I want to touch on is actually future fertility, and I'll be totally honest with y'all. I'm not sexually active and I'm not planning to be anytime soon, but when that time does come and I'm looking to start a family, I am nervous. I'm nervous that having an eating disorder history and having my period be gone for several years of my like prime reproductive time is going to impact my ability to have kids one day. And I think that's a big fear that a lot of us have. For those of us who have experienced period loss and period recovery, you just don't know. And that's something that I'm gonna have to really trust the Lord in if I do get a chance to try to start a family one day. So we will see, but this is actually an area of research that I'm super interested in. And I actually published a clinical practice guideline a couple months ago on treatment of individuals with disordered eating and fertility concerns. So I will happily link that PDF below. It's a piece of work that I'm really proud of and a project that was really enjoyable to work on with a nursing school professor of mine. So I don't know if we have enough time for me to answer the questions and stories that y'all shared with me on Instagram. So I might do another question bucket or box or whatever on my stories. Definitely follow me on Instagram. I'll like link my handle or whatever somewhere on the screen. But I will ask for more stories and questions and do a whole follow-up video on this if you're interested. But thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. This is a piece of my story that I love to talk about. I think it's super important and just an area of women's health that we don't give enough attention to and don't have enough honest conversations about. So if this is part of your story as well, if you want to share with me your experience with losing your period, getting it back, or anything like that, feel free to message me on social media or drop it in the comments below. I would love to chat with you guys. And if you have any future video ideas that you want to see from me around women's health, periods, eating disorder recovery, anything like that, feel free to let me know and I will do my best to incorporate them later on. Thank you guys so much for watching and I hope you have a very Merry Christmas. Bye.